Welcome back to Music 239, Intro to World Music, and specifically Music of Africa. We're going to try to finish up this unit on Africa during this session today, and then we'll also talk a little bit about the test. We finished in our last session with the Dagbangba drummers and the Lunzi drummers, so we're ready to continue at this time with the music of the mbira. Okay? The mbira is one of the most famous African instruments. It is also known as a thumb piano. And you literally play it with your thumbs. That's why they call it a thumb piano. The actual name for it, though, is mbira. And you should notice that on this particular instrument, I've got a piece of paper that is sort of woven between the different prongs of the metal here. And what it does, when you compare that to playing the other side, it creates a rattle. You hear the rattle of the paper, changes the sound just a little bit and creates another aspect to the sound. African cultures really thrive on that rattling sound. They really like it. With many instruments that have a plucked note or a piece of metal, they will create a rattling effect either with bottle caps or with seashells, or in this case, I've simply created it with a piece of paper to create that particular rattle that African cultures really like. Now, for that reason, the mbira could be considered to be a hybrid instrument. Why is that? In which category would the mbira fall? Yes, Ariel, what do you think?
Would it fall between idiophone and membranophone?
Right. It would fall typically in the idiophone category because we have a vibration of something going on that's not a string, right? And that's the definition of idiophone. But because I've put a piece of paper in here that's rattling when I play the instrument, it could qualify as a hybrid between idiophone and membranophone. Now, in the online quiz that you take, if there are issues created by this dichotomy, please see me about it after the quiz is over. But be aware of this particular kind of combination effect, okay? Because that will may be an important element of the test. So be aware of that. This particular mbira is not African. Okay, it's been created from a kit and was done for somebody's music education project. So they've got it brightly colored with primary colors all around. Well, I guess green isn't a primary color, is it? But they've got lots of nice colors and everything, and this one has been created from a kit, which you can get online and make mbiras pretty inexpensively. Now, the thing that will often happen when you hear this instrument played is that it will be played inside a gourd resonator. And I've brought the gourd from the water drum to demonstrate that for you today because the sound of the instrument was fairly subdued as you heard it played like this. But if you put it inside the gourd serves as a resonator and you get a lot more sound out of it. Really focuses the sound and serves as a resonator for the instrument. And so a lot of times you see that. It's called a deze, D-E-Z-E, okay? And the gourd resonator is a very, very common accoutrement to this instrument that you see played in the African cultures. I'll pass this around so you all can give it a try. everybody get a chance to play it on both sides so that you get a sense of what the what it would take to play this instrument, and then also what the rattling effect is going to be. So we may hear mbira music being played constantly during the discussion today, and that's okay. It's a nice soundscape for the lecture. Okay? So the music that we have in our anthology for the mbira is called Nemumusasa. Does anybody know what that means offhand? Cutting branches for shelter. Nemumusasa. And on the test, you are free to use the African title of these songs or the translation of the song. If this piece were played on the test and you put down Cutting Branches for Shelter, you'd get full credit. So I'm giving credit for translations as well, either way. And your text talks a little bit about where that might have come from. In fact, this song may well have been associated with war, just like some of the other songs that we've heard from other cultures. And I'll let you read through that on the text.
I have a question about the
Yes. Yes.
They're not, it looks like the little things you strike are put in a random order. Is that right?
In this particular instrument, I think it's right. Okay.
Oh, it's not usually the case.
That's not usually the case. They're actually put in such a way that they can be tuned to specific pitches. Now, they may not be Western-oriented pitches. In most cases, an mbira is an example of fairly non-Western tuning again. This particular mbira was created from a kit and was not created with a whole lot of forethought in terms of what the pitches were going to turn out to be. So don't use that particular example as a good judge of what an mbira really is supposed to sound like.
What do they tune like the mbiras or the kora harps to?
They don't have a standard. Yeah, I mean, in some cases they may use, nowadays they might use electronic tuning devices like guitarists sometimes use. But I think that there is a real lack of a particular standard for where those pitches ought to be. So that's why you get a lot of non-Western kinds of tunings, because they're not using a particular standard. Whereas in the West, Western cultures eventually got to where they were working with the actual vibration like A440. And the mbira tuning is not necessarily set up that way. Good questions. Let's listen to just a little bit of Nemumusasa on your CD. So, did everybody hear the rattling sound that's going on there? Okay. Yeah, that is very typical of African cultures to want to hear that rattle going on, creating almost a soundscape against which the rest of the music sounds. And if you look at the transcription in your text of the mbira music, Nemumusasa, you will find that there is actually a 3-against-2 pattern going on. Okay, looking at the transcription, take a look at, first of all, the music on the staff in the middle shows a division of the beat by 3. You see how there are 3 little X notes in each one of those beam patterns? Okay. That's a division by 3. But then, if you look just above and below of the patterns played by the individual pitches in the various hands, and in each of the hands with the various fingers, you see a division by 2 going on. So, by the arrangement of the pitches themselves, there is a 2 against 3 pattern going on in this music, and it's difficult to perceive when you hear it. When you hear the music, it sounds just like a jumble of pitches going on. But if you transcribe it and take a look at the way the notes are actually arranged, the 2 against 3 division of the beat is happening in this music, just as it did with the drums that we heard from the Lunsi players. Let's listen to it again and see if we can hear more of what's going on from that transcription. Think back to that drumming pattern. Okay, with the 3 against 2 that we did earlier in the last session, and apply it now to the pitches with the mbira music, and you see how this 3 against 2 pattern is so important throughout so many African cultures. Okay. Any other questions on this piece, Nemu Musasa, mbira music? So, okay, how many elements then of characteristics of African music could we apply to this piece? We did one, right? 3 against 2, polyrhythm. Buzzing, rattling sound. That's one of the characteristics, right? We've got 2. What else? Repetition, absolutely. Non-Western sense of pitch. Good. Anything else?
Could it be pentatonic?
Pentatonic. Not necessarily, although if you look at the transcription there, you don't see any more than 5 pitches. It's not a traditional kind of pentatonicism, though, because there are some half steps in places where you wouldn't expect them to be. But I think I probably would buy pentatonic if you wrote that on a test. Sure. Anything else? So we've come up with, what, 3 or 4 or 5 characteristics, 4 characteristics there, okay, that could be used for the test. So this hopefully will go in your notes, and you can use this information in studying for the test.
What about syncopation?
Syncopation. Yeah, I think there's certainly a syncopated kind of sound to what's going on there. I think you might be able to sell that. Yes?
But wouldn't the syncopation probably be brought on because of the 2 against 3 rhythm?
Possibly.
Because the whole point of the 2 against 3 is to distort
Mm-hmm.
the sense of where the beat happens.
Mm-hmm.
So are they synonymous, or?
They can be. I mean, 2 against 3 can create a syncopated sort of feel. When you think about it, syncopation, our definition for that was an accented note that happens off the beat. So if the beat for you is here, and then you're going dun da da dun dun da da dun dun da da dun dun da da da, and you have 2 against 3 going on, then there are some accented notes that are happening off of that particular beat. Could be considered one and the same. Good. Everybody get a chance to play the mbira? Okay, good. Now, your CDs have a song that is actually a piece of African popular music that comes next. And The thought behind it is that, at least in terms of the person that composed the music, the mbira music was an influence on the music that you're hearing. See if you agree. Do you hear mbiras in there? Yeah, yeah. Where does the mbira sound happen in that recording? What the electric guitars are playing, particularly in the high range, has that sort of mbira kind of sound to it as you compare the Nema Musasa recording to this composition called Nyarai, which is a piece of chimurenga music by Thomas Mapfuno, and you can read about that in your text. The whole movement, this song called Be Ashamed, having to do with the government in Zimbabwe. There's some interesting things in this discussion as you read over this particular phenomenon, and one of them has to do with censorship. Did anybody run into that in your reading on this chimurenga music? It wasn't this song that's on your CD, but an earlier song that he wrote criticizing the government was basically censored by the government, but it got out anyway because people liked to hear it, and it became a sort of an underground movement kind of song. When you think about music of various cultures in connection with politics, you run into some very interesting kinds of phenomenon, and one of those is censorship. We're going to look at this issue a little later in the course as well, but many times governments do not like to have people criticize them. And so if there is music that is doing that, many times those songs will be censored by the government, or at least the government will attempt to censor those songs. And they'll get out anyway, and that's how everybody ends up knowing about them. So this is an excellent example of this particular phenomenon. In this case, the song that we're hearing actually celebrates the victory of the black majority, where there had been a white minority government in Zimbabwe for many years. The victory of Robert Mugabe in Zimbabwe was celebrated in the song that you have in your CD. And that's what that's about. But I think that the censorship issue is one that bears a closer look, and we will come back to that in this course as we continue to study this music. One other song that you have in your CDs is from the Baka people of Central Africa in the Congo Basin. Let's look at that culture for just a moment. These are forest people. The book indicates that in some cases these people have been referred to as pygmies, but in fact that is an ethnocentric label to put on a culture, and that it's more appropriate to simply refer to them as forest people. The song that we are going to hear from your CD, Makala, is a net hunting song, and it creates a fascinating cultural sound, completely different from any of the songs that we've heard so far. Let's listen to a bit of that. sound, something out of another world. So, what are we hearing here? What kind of texture is this, first of all? We studied textures at the very beginning of this course. Remember, we talked about monophonic, homophonic, polyphonic, and what was the other one? Heterophonic, right. Okay, so what kind of texture are we hearing here? Certainly there is a polyphonic aspect to the texture because there are different things going on at different times, right? If you look at the transcription in your books, you'll find that there are polyphonic textures, but there are also heterophonic texture because the same tune is being sung in different ways by different people. And so we have polyphony and we also have heterophony going on at the same time. And that's one of the things that makes this texture so complicated, is that both textures exist at the same time. The sound of this is very much like a sound of children singing, isn't it? But in fact, they are not children. They are adult singers. They're just small people, and so their voices are higher than we expect them to be. The other thing is that there's a good deal of yodeling technique going on in what they're doing. What is a yodel? Describe it in technical terms. Yes?
It's a rapid flick between chest and head voice.
Right. It's a rapid motion between chest and head voice, and we talked about that when we discussed falsetto in the Native American cultures, and we heard falsetto in many of those examples of the Native American music. Here in the Forest People music, we hear the yodeling effect of going back and forth between head and chest voice in a rapid kind of way. And that's what yodeling essentially is. And we hear that quite a bit in this texture. Okay. Now, as you look at the transcription of this piece, you see how many people must be participating in order to make this happen. How many different lines of music do they have transcribed here? 13. So there's at least 13 different things going on at once. And there's more on the next page. So how many total? Well, the fact is that not all of these are going on at the same time. Okay, these are actually separate staves. So if you look at the way this is happening, you see where it has A and then B and then D. Okay, some of these things are not happening all at the same time necessarily. But there is a significant number of separate voices all happening at once that the transcriber is coming up with here. Now, how does that relate to this culture, the Baka people's culture? Well, if you look at the page a little further ahead in your text where it talks about the culture and this society, I'm going to read just a little bit from your book, where it says, "The social system was informal and flexible. Men and women had roughly equal power and obligations. Consensus decisions were negotiated by argument. Children were treated gently. Individuals were not coerced by formal laws, distant leaders, or threatening deities. The forest was God, and the people were the children of the forest." So we have a culture here where everybody's essentially equal. Everybody gets to have input into how things are going to be done. And I think there's a reflection of this as you look at their music. Everybody's participating, everybody's part is equally important, and so you have a very egalitarian kind of society whose laws and structures are reflected by their music itself. And I think that's really the most important part of the lesson to be learned from this music. Let's go back and listen to just a little bit more of it and listen to the yodeling effects, and also think about it from a standpoint of total democracy. Yodeling is very apparent in that section that we just heard. Okay. Regrettably, the forest people have been encroached upon by people tearing up their land and cutting down the forest and bringing in other cultures from the outside, and they have not fared very well with their interactions with the outside world. And regrettably, this culture is probably going to disappear within a few years. It's important to be able to, I think, keep a record of the fact that a culture like this existed, and one of the ways is by hearing their music and understanding and remembering what their music did. What about the test? How could we characterize this music in terms of our characteristics? What could we come up with? Polyrhythm? Certainly lots of different rhythms going on at the same time, aren't there? Okay? What else? Yes?
Would it be choral singing?
Choral singing? Uh-huh. Absolutely. Repetition seems to be there quite a bit, doesn't it? What else? Pentatonic. Yeah, I think so. If you look at the transcription there, you see very pentatonic kinds of influences with the number of notes that are being sung. Okay, good. Anything else on this? Non-Western sense of pitch. Yes, I think so. As you listen to the pitches that are going on there, you really do hear some pitches that fall outside the cracks of the 12-tone system. Yes?
Is there a sort of call and response?
Call and response, there's a possibility that you could say that certainly some voices following other voices a little later on, possibly. Not quite as pronounced as what we saw in some of the other pieces, though. Accompanied by body movement. There is dance going on with this, sure. So you see several different categories into which this piece and all of the pieces that we've studied could fall as you begin to get your thoughts together for the test. More about that in just a few minutes. But first, let's talk about something that's not in your text, which is the drum called the djembe, and it is so commonly used and so representative of African cultures that even though it's not in the text, it seems appropriate to mention it here. We will have a couple of djembes in class when we try to reconstruct Agabek Kor during our next session after the test. And you can see pictures on the PowerPoint of what a djembe looks like and a little bit of description about it. But if you're interested in African drumming, a djembe is a great place to start, and they're pretty easy to get. Just about any music store will have access to a djembe. You can also get them online. Great place to start if you're interested in this style. And then, as I mentioned before, please complete the online quiz for Chapter 3 today so that we can get our unit on Africa finished up. Let's talk about the test. First of all, the test will cover all of the units that we've covered so far, including material from chapters 1 and 10, which was the very first PowerPoint presentation, chapter 2 on Native America, chapter 3 on Africa, and then also the small unit we did on Ozarks traditional music. So all of that material will be fair game for the first test. The format of the test will be multi-dimensional design. So we will begin, for example, with the listening section. There will be 5 pieces to listen to on the test. And I have a list prepared that you should find on the website as well for all of the listening possibilities for Test 1. So I've not included everything from the CDs. But there are 12 pieces there, of which 5 will be taken for the test. And when those appear, there will be 5 points available for each one. You get 1 point for identifying the composition, the title, and that can be either in the original language or the translation. You'll get another point for identifying the instrumentation or the voices. So, for example, if it's for voice and rattle, for example, simply identify voice and rattle in the case of, say, the yebiche, for example. Yes?
On the test, how, like if we're writing it in the native language, how much is spelling going to matter?
Oh, as long as I can recognize what it is, I'll give you credit for it. I will probably correct your spelling, but you won't probably lose credit if you misspell, for example, Shizane. Okay? Forget to put the accents over the E's and stuff like that. I'll give you credit for it, although I'll probably write it in parentheses the way it should have been. Okay, that's 2 points. The third point is acquired by identifying the specific culture from which the song comes. And by that, I don't mean Africa, okay? I mean the Shona people. I mean the Yebiche is from which culture? Navajo, right. So don't say Native American. I'm looking for the specific culture from which the song comes. Yes?
Could you tell me what we're supposed to identify again with the song, with the listening?
Okay, from the listening, the title, the instrumentation, the specific culture from which the song comes, and then characteristics of this music. And since there are 2 more points available, you'll need at least 2 characteristics for the minimum on the test. So if you want more, why you can add more characteristics if you want, but only a total of 5 points will be available. Yes.
When you're playing the pieces, are you starting from the beginning of the songs?
Yes. I will probably not play the entire song though.
Okay.
I'll probably just
You
play.
start, like, the middle,
No, I won't start in the middle of the song. I start from the beginning of the song, but I'll only play a certain portion of it. Yes?
If you miss some points on like the first 4 parts of it, can you put more than 2 characteristics? Will that make up the points you missed that?
No, you can't make up for missing the title of the song. You'll still have to miss a point for not getting the right title or putting it in the wrong culture or something like that.
Putting more than 2 isn't going to help you, really.
Putting more than 2 is not going to help you, but you're welcome to do it if you want. Yes?
Could you give me an example of what characteristics we should be looking for?
Sure. Pick a song.
The last one.
Okay, the last song, Makala, right? Okay. From that song, you would certainly want to say that it was, you could certainly say pentatonic, right? Some of the things we mentioned in class, hopefully you were taking notes. That you could certainly say that it was choral singing. You could certainly say that there was repetition going on. Okay.
So if we say pentatonic, there's a 50% chance to be right.
Yeah.
On any of these.
Pretty good chance. Yeah. Now here's the thing. I mean, and the question that came up about the fact that, well, you're only going to get credit for 2 characteristics for each one, so why should you put any more? Well, what if one of those is wrong? If one of those characteristics is wrong, it would be good for you to list some others so that your chances of getting 2 of them right are increased. So I'd encourage you to put more characteristics than just 2 if you can think of them.
If we
Yeah.
accidentally put in the wrong one, will you not count off for it? Or?
That's correct. I mean, if I see 2 that are correct, I'll probably circle the one that I disagree with, but I probably won't take off for it if you've got 2 of them that are correct in addition to that. All right, so that's the listening. There's going to be 5 of those, so that will be a total of 25 points out of 100, a quarter of the test. The next section will be matching. That'll be 10 points, fairly small portion, matching terms with definitions. Third section of the test will be multiple choice. There will be 20 of those worth 2 points each, for a total of 40 points. The next section will be short answer, fill in the blank, for a total of 13 points. And then there will be an essay worth 12 points. On the essay, I will be looking for you to use complete sentences and proper grammar. Please also write so that I can read it. That would be very helpful. And also, I'll ask for specific examples. Okay, so knowing all of the listening examples will be very helpful to you because then you can rely on that pool of knowledge to use those for as specific examples of the points that you're going to make in your essay. So you'll need to have some of those on hand. Yes?
Can you give an example essay question? In terms of how much we'll have to talk about?
How much you'll have to have, in other words, how long should it be?
Yeah.
Like, how in depth do you want?
Just, I think just so you cover the topic.
Is it like pretty poly where it's like it's not that you cover
I'm sorry, you'll have to repeat that.
like the pretty poly essay
Mhm.
where we're just comparing,
Yeah.
contrasting, and as long as we cover it,
Right.
it's good.
As long as you cover the material, I would say a good essay should probably last about a page. I mean, you'll be given a page, and if you fill that up and maybe go a little beyond that, you're probably going to be fine. Just so you cover the topic. And one of the main things I'm going to look for is specific examples. And so, and for that, by that I mean titles of specific examples. Okay, so if you are comparing and contrasting the use of, let's say, here's a good possible essay question that's not on the test. Compare and contrast the use of repetition in all of the music that we've studied so far. So then, and use at least 5 specific examples. Okay? So then you could grab 5 specific examples from the cultures we've studied so far and compare and contrast the use of repetition in, say, Folsom Prison Blues compared to Pretty Polly, compared to Cutting Branches for Shelter. How are they different and how are they the same? Okay. Well, in Folsom Prison Blues, the repetition happens when the chorus keeps coming back. In Pretty Polly, the repetition happens because they basically use the same melody every time the verse happens. Cutting Branches for Shelter, what's that piece about? Anybody remember what piece that is? Nema Musasa? That's the mbira. Yeah, that's the thumb piano, the mbira piece. Okay, so how does the repetition work there?
It just creates a background ambience.
The patterns, yeah, the little melodic patterns are repeated over and over again. Okay, so if you wanted to compare Folsom Prison Blues with Nema Musasa, you could say, yes, repetition occurs in each one, but it's a completely different design in terms of how it happens. That's a good topic for an essay. That kind of cross-cultural kind of comparison is excellent essay material. Other questions on the test? All right, we will see you then. Study hard.